Hey, everybody, welcome to Hear Us Out. I'm Patrick,
And I'm Paul.
and we are not Eric Draven. We are not the Crow, but we may just be the people you're looking for. If you want to take a few moments of your life and join us in realizing that a Crow remake or a Crow reboot or whatever the 2024 Crow will turn out to be referred to as is a bad idea. And it's not just a bad idea for the obvious reasons of maybe just stop doing reboots. But there is something about the original movie that cannot be recaptured, quite literally cannot be recaptured. And that is everything. But
Hmm.
specifically, Paul, I think we need to look at 1994, The Crow, possibly some of the most perfect casting of all time.
Yeah, definitely agree. Yeah. So this show is going to be talking about the 1994 Crow. We're not talking about the new 2024 Crow. Other than the fact is, more than likely, Patrick, you're not going to go see it?
I'm not going to go
No?
see it.
You're not?
Yeah, so no,
No?
it's fine to say. I always say, see a movie before you judge it harshly. In this case, I'm deciding to never judge it harshly by just not seeing it.
Yeah. But that's perfectly acceptable if you want to keep something in your heart. You don't go
Yes.
see the other version of it.
Yeah.
So
I'm
yeah,
I'm
so
too big a
talking
Crow
about
fan. By
casting.
the way, just yeah, cards on the table. It's come up on the channel before. We just got a little error there. I think we're still broadcasting. I am a huge Crow fan. All the everything at the time. I owned the posters, the blah. Some of you will have seen. I have a calendar that I still use from 1995 or whatever year that was for the Crow. I absolutely fucking love that original film. So my bias out there on the table. We're hiding nothing here, Paul. And
Mhm.
you should probably actually, it doesn't mean quite as much to you. And when I say mean, I know it's ridiculous that it means a lot to me, but where are you on the original Crow?
So I guess I never saw it obviously when it came out, but it was one of those kind of like cult classic films when I started kind of more delving into a lot of films and stuff. So it was on my list of kind of cult classic to watch. I very much enjoyed it. It's right up my alley of kind of
Mm.
comic book films that are kind of like mirror. If you see Miramax on like a '90s comic book kind of adaptation, you know you're in for fun
Yeah.
kind of thing. It might not be the most like mind-blowingly kind of like
It's not going to have the
epic,
biggest budget.
yeah, but it's fantastic at what they do, what they try out, and stuff like that. And it's just and they focus more on the story and the characters and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
So without further ado, folks, let's talk The Crow 94. And I think everybody knows the history of The Crow, or at least one part of the history of The Crow. And that is, if I can actually get my this is what happens when you let me do the show, Paul. I get things wrong. There we go. Um, it was of its time. It's a film so of its time. Just everything from its uh, what a lot of people would say kind of the cure head aesthetic, but it had a deep dark aesthetic to it. It was one of those films that just it oozed what it was. It took the comics and then the graphic novel, as a lot of people picked it up as instead of individual issues. The graphic novel covered the idea of, well, we are looking at a dark, dirty, dingy city. And what Alex Proyas and everybody involved recreated was really a dark, dreary, rainy, very much kind of a dead, just manky city.
it it really played into like the '90s kind of like aesthetic of dark gothic kind of storylines a lot. Like it was
Yeah.
really kind of because this is the time of like Spawn and The Crow and Dark City and all
Yep.
the kind of like dark gritty looking kind of things. It was really when movies went into a grunge phase kind of thing where they were just like we're mixing grunge with gothic and
Yeah.
kind of thing, which was really fun to see again. I love that phase. I love that phase of movie styles that started going into that. And this very much stylizes that kind of thing again.
And it was smart enough to know that this is not like a lot of people from the outside thought, oh, well, look, it's for anybody who doesn't remember, you can look it up on the internet. Cure heads, people are into the Cure, goths. Um, but this wasn't just goths. This was metalers, anybody with an alternate interest. A lot of people went to see The Crow. A lot of people enjoyed The Crow, particularly after it came out and realized, hey, it's a good movie. Let's find out. It gained a cult following very quickly, which is a weird thing that could happen back then before the internet, or at least before the big internet. And part of all that was The Crow covered everything of its time. It was quintessentially 90s while also being timeless. And it had one of the greatest soundtracks for me of all time for any movie. Like I've thrown it up on screen here. You've got The Cure, you've got Rage Against the Machine, you've got Stone Temple Pilots, you've got Nine Inch Nails, you've got what for people who like, let's say non-pop music, this is actually a wider band of music than it might first sound. To people who aren't into any of this, they're like, oh, it's all just heavy music. No, this definitely covered a lot of people. Like Pantera are there, and so are like Jesus and Mary Chain. There are bands that are not exactly the same. And little side note, Paul, I got to see Helmet it would have been about a year after this was released in a gig in Dublin. When they said, any requests, I shouted out Milk Toast, which is the name of the track here. And I shouted it so loudly that I have a very loud voice when I need it. Most of the crowd stopped. The singer stopped, turned around and went, who said that? In a crowded gig, I managed to shout the name of the song loud enough that he turned around, ended up pointing at me and going, well, you really want to hear it, so we better play it. And I had that moment of, I just shouted over an entire crowd, so I must be full of a lot of Coca-Cola right now. Coca-Cola, folks. I wasn't drinking.
It was good. Yeah, no, it's got an epic soundtrack. I will say that kind of thing. Like, yeah, it's very very good in kind of like setting the mood and setting the stage and stuff like that. So, but the thing is that the aesthetics and the music and soundtrack, fantastic soundtrack. I loved it. I think it was like when I watched it first, I think that was when I was going into my phase of kind of Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that, which is really nice because it was just like, oh, we're currently converging in taste, kind of thing, which is nice. But the cast.
Let's do it, and will we start with the big one, Paul? Because it's got to be Brandon Lee, Eric Draven, or a lot of people would say the Crow, but I'm not going to get technical about it. His name is Eric Draven. Crow is actually the vehicle to bring you back, and never mind. But Paul, he's synonymous with this movie because it was his last.
Yes, yeah, that's the darkest and also most well-known fact of this movie.
Yeah. So I was wondering, did you want to recount in a line what happened to him for anybody who isn't aware?
Yeah, so I actually specifically looked this up because there's Brandon Lee was unfortunately a victim of essentially kind of poor safety, I guess is probably the best way.
Yep.
It's a scene in which Brandon Lee's character Eric Draven gets shot. And there was essentially a mix-up with the weapon, and essentially, so it was in a scene where he's meant to get shot, and they hide the gun in a bag, and of course, in 90s fashion, they wanted the bag to explode out when they shoot the gun, and the explosive essentially also shot or damaged essentially the blank bullet, and a shard went into Brandon Lee, which he eventually died from his injuries, kind of thing. So that's it. There's no footage. The reason I was looking it up specifically was not only to know the story, but also there's no footage ever. The footage has been destroyed from under a request from Brandon Lee's family.
Yeah, which
they
is
had
the
a
right
police
thing.
version. Yeah, they had a police version for the investigation, and once it no longer was needed for evidence, they destroyed it. So there's no copies of it. There's no images. It's not in the film or anything like that.
And there are all sorts of people who say, "Oh, this is the scene where you can see him getting shot." That's none of that is ever the case. But yeah, so prop mishap, whatever the way you want to phrase it, it changed some of the safety rules for Hollywood. You know, there was a reaction to this, which was good. Obviously, recently you've got the. Is it called Burn? I can't remember the Alec Baldwin tragedy. So there's every time this happens, safety should get better. So I hope it does again. It did at least improve after Brandon Lee's tragic death. But here's the thing: Brandon Lee at the time not a whole lot to a whole lot of people in some ways, because it was just, oh, it's Bruce Lee's son. Whereas I grew up in a house with an older brother who was an absolute Bruce Lee fanatic. So Brandon Lee was actually somebody to me, and I'd watched a few of his movies, um, which I'm not going to say they are. Okay, The Crow was his going to be his big break. Let's put it that way. But he had paid his dues. He had absolutely paid his dues. He did one of these I haven't seen, Laser Mission, but Showdown in Little Tokyo with Dolph Lundgren. I've seen it. Rapid Fire was a Brandon Lee vehicle. Again, there was a lot of son of Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee. The Crow wasn't
Yeah.
going to be that. This was going to be a serious acting break, and he really did put in the effort, Paul.
Yeah, yeah. Like I will say that it's an interesting kind of one because I didn't know Brandon Lee as much. I knew him from The Crow. I knew the story and stuff like that. But uh, yeah, it's made me more interested in his back catalog of work that I really want to take a look at it because as The Crow, he has very amazing, really good moments in it of kind of poeticness uh, which is really well delivered for someone who's obviously been more in an action kind of like this
Yeah,
isn't also an action scene, but the character's meant to be a little bit more deeper. He's going through a kind of a metamorphosis of sorts,
yeah.
and he's really kind of a poetic kind of character. Um, and Brandon Lee delivers those lines really well. So it's really nice.
Yeah, and honestly, he obviously had the fighting chops. He like you say, he'd been getting action roles because that's what he was viewed at. So this was going to be his chance at serious acting. From my point of view, and I know we better move on, we better speed up on all this because we got to talk about more than just the star. Brandon Lee was having, for me, his Heath Ledger Joker moment where he was getting to show the full range of just how good he could be. And I think if you look, and I'm not going to defend the previous movies, Rapid Fire, Showdown, Little Tokyo, they are what they are. And Brandon Lee is not terrible in them, but you can see he's learning some of his acting craft there. But he took this so seriously. He put himself in discomfort, and I don't mean just for fighting and wearing, getting shot up lots means lots of squibs and, really, really not acting as much as getting hurt, let's say, which was the way back in the day. Which ultimately it's tragic that he made the ultimate sacrifice. But his actual acting, he motivated himself with the cold. He really threw himself into this. He got himself into the shape and the mindset, and really understood and I think believed in the character. And you can kind of see in interviews that he gave while it was filming that he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor. And if the only thing you've ever seen him in is The Crow, I think most people would say, yeah, I could take that guy seriously as an actor. What a tragedy that we lost him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I guess I'm not like the thing with me is that I'm not as big a fan of The Crow as you are.
Yeah,
But the thing is that from that perspective, Brandon Lee, you could definitely showed a good amount of chops. I also want to point out that this film is two parts. It's because of the passing of Brandon, there was a shutdown, and
hmm,
then it continued on. So like, there's a lot of moments in there that like definitely feel like there was going to be more to it, but
yeah,
because of the tragedy, there wasn't allowed. So it makes essentially more of the Brandon Lee kind of Eric Draven conversations a lot more important and a lot more kind of impactful because he's not a very expressive character, or
yeah.
not expressive, very talkative character in the rest of the kind of film, obvious for obvious reasons. But it's very good. I do like it. I do like the Crow character, which Brandon Lee has brought to life.
Yeah. Well, Paul, because we're going to move on, I think we should have a little look at the comment section. If you wouldn't mind taking a quick scan.
No, which is the original is so great. The look, the feel, the soundtrack, all of it. That's from
Thank you,
Brew.
Brian.
Agreed. I think The Crow is the best page to screen graphic novel slash comic book movie. Every frame could be page in a book. I do
Thank you,
agree with
Gavin.
that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It. The Crow is one of the earliest studies in here's how you can do this right. And now, is there an element of Jaws to it? Jaws is a better film because the shark didn't work. Did the tragedy of the Crow, and I'm not gonna don't nobody twist my words here in this. Take it the way it's meant. because of the tragedy and all the adversity that it faced, was the final product actually maybe better than it would have been? Did they pull back? Did they tell more of a more muted story in places? Did they convey emotion through wider shots of the city where they would have done close-ups and dialogue? Who knows? But I definitely think it did turn out to be. It's probably the first that I can think of good example of taking like a comic or a graphic novel and putting it on screen.
I would agree. I would say that because of essentially the restrictions that was due to the tragedy. They had to make a more of a visual storyline, which I do think is more which is respective of the source material, which is really great. And it does make Eric Draven's kind of like character a lot more impactful when he speaks. So
Yeah. And Brian says, cool helmet story. And Brian, because you'll know where this was, they don't hold gigs anymore. It was in Dalymount Park. So you can imagine how many people I was screaming over. That's how loud I was, and that's how into helmet I was at the time. Um, he looked class as the character, says Brian. Yeah, he really did. He pulled it. The Joker could have ended up looking cheesy, but didn't, thanks to Heath Ledger and all of the makeup and costume people that were involved. And I think the same thing can be said. It would be very easy for the Crow, the like Eric Draven character, to actually look really goofy and silly, and he doesn't.
yeah, I agree. The look and feel is very cool.
Yeah.
So, and the tragedy enhanced the mythology, like it did in a sad fashion.
Yeah.
But I think this would have been a cult classic even without it.
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so. Anyway, we better move on past Brandon, and go to the villain of the piece, Paul. Oh, Michael Wincott's top dollar. Here's an actor I don't understand. And when I say I don't understand, I mean I don't understand why he's not a household name. Because there is nobody, and if you've ever watched The Crow, this character will have stood out to you. Perfect casting. No one else has that voice or can bring that vampiric, weird, malevolent air that's, he plays the crime kingpin, but he plays it with a greed and a joy and a frivolous kind of laughing nature at times that turns so sinister, and he's just so wonderfully weird. He's got a malevolent, chaotic nature to him, and along with that voice and the rest of his performance, makes him the perfect opposing casting to what Brandon Lee brought with Eric Draven.
Yeah, like Michael Wilcott is just fantastic. Yeah, he's a great voice. He has a great presence in the movie. Um, it does make a sense of like he is the king of the city from a criminal standpoint. Um, but for a lot of the film, I realized that you don't know a lot about him. He
Yeah.
tells stories about his past and stuff like that, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But his voice and his character commands essentially the scenes that he's in.
Yeah.
That it makes it very important that like you don't know why he's essentially the kingpin, but when he's in a room with other people and he's such a presence, you go, that's why. That's why
Yeah.
he's so sinister and so commanding of a character that like you completely understand, even though it doesn't show too much of like his like there's other villains who show why they're in charge a lot.
Yeah.
But Top Dollar, it's more just the character kind of commands so much respect and so much kind of sinister kind of feeling to him, that you're just like, yeah, definitely understand why. If he walked in a room and was just like, I own the city, I'd be just like, you have it, I'm going.
Yeah, and can I ask? So I think we'll do a little acid test for any of this stuff. Can you think of anybody, in period, anybody at the time that you would have cast that you would say, oh, well, they would have been a better choice for this? Because I honestly can't. And that not only for me includes at the time, that includes for me for all time. Nobody could have been this creepy, funny, charming, horrible, hateful, likable in the amount of screen time they had. He brought stuff to this that only he can bring to a movie, I think.
No, I can't think of anyone who could play kind of because, like, I was thinking, maybe like no, like I was thinking Keanu Reeves, but that's only for look wise. That's
Yeah,
it. Like it's only he could essentially pull off the look,
yeah.
but the commanding charisma that the character has, no.
And he would
Like
have to
that's it.
smoke 5,000 Marlboro a day
Well,
to create that voice.
that's the thing is Michael Moncat's voice precedes him into a room.
It does.
That's one of the best ways that I can describe it. Like he enters a room and then he enters a room
Yeah.
is a very much good way of explaining his voice.
And
So
he had a weird set of side characters that kind of gave him that air of, okay, well, this is an unconventional organization that, you know, it helped his mythos, the fact that he had Bai Ling being his sister slash lover slash all sorts of stuff, and she had the kind of mystical element going on. And then you had Tony Todd, Candyman himself, doing the Grange, the imposing, you know, first lieutenant, doorman, um, just well, I don't know what you would call him because he's not a
he's
henchman. He's like henchman in
he,
charge,
he's the right hand man
the right hand man. Thank you.
of Tony Dollar, like or Top Dollar. Yeah, Tony Todd is an imposing figure. Like
Yep.
did not remember him in this movie at all. And when the first time he shows up, he's so towering over the other characters that it's
Yes.
like, oh, okay, like
Yeah.
you know, um,
And that's what perfect casting is, folks. It's the fact that, oh my gosh, the impact, not just that the character had, but the actor who played the character. And it's not just a good performance. It's like, yes, would not pick anybody else. This is perfect for the story you're telling and how you're doing it. This is perfect. It doesn't get any better. So get in the comments. If you can imagine people who could have done it better at the time, I would love to hear them because I'd love to actually hear one that could convince me. I think it's going to be pretty tough though.
um, yeah, like yeah, Tony Todd is a very good because he's got a very powerful voice as well. And up him up against Michael Wilcott, having them two speak together, it's very interesting because Tony Todd's Grange commands the scenes that he's in,
Mhm.
except when he's in the scene with Top Dollar, which is
Yeah,
very interesting to have because he's a very powerful
and
kind of a character. I
that's
can't
the
see.
best Darth Vader Emperor moment. You have to be able to have that. The guy that you're scared of. Oh, he has a boss.
Yeah, like that's the very thing, and which is Bailing is also very as mystery and kind
Mm.
of like mystique and kind of stuff, which is nice. It also adds more plot heaviness,
Yeah, you're not.
like as in it has someone.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be able to put that character anywhere in your head logically. They're supposed to
No,
be unsettling in that kind of I don't know how to take you, and that's why she's great casting for it because she has that kind of I wouldn't say ethereal, but that kind of you don't fit in this room feeling. Um, she comes
yeah.
with a certain amount of awkwardness. Anything in the comments before we move on to our next one, Paul?
I think imagine a Fincher Crow movie, which would be very weird. And William Defoe as Top Dollar, possibly. Don't
Nice try. Comes up short
not.
on the. He would end up as Willem Dafoe always does. He's just too kind of creepy with it all. I don't know. He can do a lot of things. Willem Dafoe can do bloody anything. But I don't think if you watch The Crow again and try to think of him taking over Michael Wincott as Top Dollar, I don't know if you would believe his mood swings without Willem Dafoe turning that natural malevolence in his face into a bit of a caricature. Because let's face it, that's why he got cast as the Green Goblin once upon a time. Willem Dafoe, I love you, but you've got a face. Is there any politer way to put it than that? You got a face.
No, like I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
I would say that William Defoe, yeah, William Defoe. I get it. Once again, it. I don't think he seems more of a kind of gentleman, a gentleman kingpin,
Yes.
kind of thing with a manicness. Whereas there's always this underlying kind of Top Dollar kind of creepiness that's going on.
Yeah.
But I can't see anyone.
Well, Paul, if we go
Um,
from hero to villain, I'm just conscious of time. I think I want to try and get this talked about. Ernie Hudson from, let's face it, Winston Zedmore from Ghostbusters. That's what he's known to most people as, unless you're a massive Congo fan, in which case he's in Congo. I think he's a great actor. But one thing that you cannot deny about Ernie Hudson, he brings a a soft, emotional, everyman feeling. He grounds things that he's in. Even Ghostbusters, that's what he brought. That was some of his genius in his casting for that. Because he's a connection for the Eric Draven character before death, or let's say, at the time of tragedy, what happened to him and his girlfriend, and now his life all these years on after, sticking his nose in and trying to solve that, being losing rank, etc., in the police force. Any of the scenes between Eric Draven, so Brandon Lee, and Ernie Hudson are just, they're delicious because there's such a soft normalcy to them that the emotion creeps right in onto the screen.
Yeah, he feels like a father figure.
Yeah, and his
Um,
natural empathy is just hard to beat.
it is very much so.
Again, I'm going to ask the question: is there somebody that you would have cast at the time that can bring what he brought to this movie? And when I say what he brought, I mean that emotional, effortless emotional core, the grounding that he can be talking to. So there's the scene where they face off the first time he meets the undead Eric Draven, and is like, he's just doing his job, but he's so casual about it, yet stressed because it's a situation. Everything he brings to the scene allows Brandon Lee to be cryptic and be interesting and be this kind of, mythical, mystical thing without it coming off cheesy. So without him, this movie wouldn't have worked. He's casting that I don't think can be beat.
No, I would definitely agree there because as I said, he kind of comes off as a father figure in a lot of way. Like he's a little bit more wiser and a little bit more kind of controlled than a lot of the other characters in the movie. I will say that his uh his understanding of it definitely feels like the city is plagued
Mm,
kind of thing, and it's very easy for people to lose hope
yeah,
and stuff, and especially those people in the police force. And he's a very much a driving force of kind of like there's always hope in dark places,
yeah,
and there's always some people continuously looking for justice and to serve that justice, and he's definitely a really good character in that kind of way. Because it's very easy to see the city is dark and dank, and no one's good in it, but you have to show some people are good and some people are fighting for the justice and goodness of it.
exactly.
And he like absolutely is the spirit of that.
Well, that's some of the brilliance of James O'Barr's work, to have written The Crow. You've got the spirit of vengeance that is the Eric Draven character, but then you got that spirit of optimistic justice, or I should say realistic justice. He's a realist, but he's still trying to do the right thing. But it's what Ernie Hudson brings. Like, this is one chat again. Anybody that you could imagine replacing him and doing a better job, I'd love to hear it. So, Paul, while Chatter coming up with the perfect answer and I have to eat my words, how about we have a look at? It's a movie of a lot of villains.
Hmm.
It's not an upbeat movie in the sense of everybody's happy and everything works out well. But you've got David Patrick Kelly, T-Bird. There is a T-Bird and his band of merry thugs, his potato heads, as one of the other characters called them. Evil. They're evil. They're awful. They're thugs. They're just a band of criminals, and they serve, to try and aggrandize themselves, but they actually serve top dollar. And you've got a couple of levels to go through because you got Tony Todd Grange's character to go through, but T-Bird is running a gang of kind of psychopathic idiots in some ways. They're not played off as the most intelligent bunch in the world, particularly one of them, but he brings that kind of ambitious air to it. And David Patrick Kelly, a lot of people know him from, well, you might know him from Commando, because who are you going to kill last? Oh yeah, Sully, it's going to be you. A little Commando hint there for anybody who's a fan. But a lot of people know him from Warriors. Warriors come out to play.
Yeah.
Uh, he's a Willem Dafoe that he's got a face, but he doesn't have that menacing, physical, imposing presence. He's not, this isn't Dwayne The Rock Johnson we're talking about here. His malevolence is more subtle and it's more psychological, and that's what I think he brings to performances. He gets cast as a bad guy quite a bit because of it.
Yeah, like yeah, he really is kind of he's a perfect casting for kind of a bad guy. He does have, as you say, he does have a face for kind of it betrays a kind of a little bit of a darker kind of
Yeah,
feeling to it. T-Bird's gang are quite good because the one really good thing about a gang in this kind of sense is that they're all um, distinguishable to each other. You know that this is like Fun Boy. This is
yeah,
with Tintin, and that kind of thing. You know that each one of them are different, and to have essentially a leader, uh, you need to have essentially the worst of the worst. And the thing with him is that he's a controlled weirdo. He's a controlled villain. With with maybe some uh feeling of grandeur
yeah,
above his station, but not so much that it comes to playing the game in the movie too much, kind of thing. But it's a very you need the whip of a gang like that, and he's
yeah.
very much the whip
And
of that gang.
to be fair, that's one thing that he did manage to bring. He has that. It's like malevolent capitalism that's driven by ego, not just by being a psycho. And it's very, very hard to cast for. He's somebody I did think of somebody else that could have done it. And this is going to surprise you. Somebody else from the Warriors, weirdly. James Remar. A little bit of Here's Out trivia for you. James Remar also was originally going to be in Aliens, playing the role of Hicks. He was originally going to do that. Didn't happen for all sorts of other reasons, and that's why sometimes you see the suit that the armor that Hicks is wearing is a bit loose on him, because it was actually fitted for a different actor originally. There you go.
Hmm.
But James Remar would have brought. He can do this kind of role, but
Hmm.
he's too imposing. Like you could think, okay, he could stand toe to toe and start punching with Brandon Lee a little bit. That's
Yeah,
not the point of the T-Bird character. That's why David Patrick Kelly was, again, chef's kiss, perfect casting.
agreed. Agreed.
Anybody in those comments has come up with anything yet? No, good. But talking about his potato heads, his gang, just to give a shout out to Lawrence Mason, who played Tintin there in the middle. You've got Michael Massey, Fun Boy, uh, Angel David playing Skank, the chap with the food hanging out of his mouth. If you haven't seen the movie, these are all bad people. Some are more just idiot bad people, some are psycho bad people, some are just not nice. But together as a gang, Paul, I think you've already kind of covered what makes them work in the movie. But without the casting being so right and the performances being so right, that whole gang could have fallen apart as a believable on screen presence.
Yeah, they all have distinct roles. They also feel like they're sins of the city,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very kind of good, which they all portray really well.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a great villainary cast, kind
Yes.
of thing, especially since they are the main kind of on screen presence for the villainry for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
So you get to know them really really well, and it's good.
Well, on from the bad guys to let's see, more bad guys. Because look, there's no way to ignore this. Look, we're not going to go through every single character in the whole thing. You know, the younger actress who played Sarah. Again, I kind of have a rule. I talked to you about this, Paul. I'm not going to critique somebody's first role as a young actor, or I don't think we should ever critique too harshly or too vocally child actors. So let's just avoid that. But there is somebody who stands out in this movie and does so much help fill in the villainy gap that's left between Top Dollar and his kind of chaotic, power, and then T-Bird's malevolent ego, and then Fun Boy and all the rest representing other types of evil in a dark, dark city and the sins of the city, as you put it. Well, the last sin. So John Polito played Gideon. Uh, I, for most people who watch the movie, a fan favorite, I think is the way to put it, because he plays a dirtball really well. He owns and runs a pawn shop. Gideon's pawn shop is, it's the scene, it's the place where some of the most important kind of scenes are played out, or scene is played out, because it sets up a whole lot of the rest of your understanding of the story. Uh, you know, John Polito's a prolific TV actor. People are going to recognize him. But what he brought, if every other villain is this face of power, chaos, violence, whatever you might want to say, he's the embodiment of just heartless survival, capitalism, profiting by looking the other way. And even when you make him look that way, he doesn't care. This guy's character arc is that he ends up in a lot of danger pretty much from the first time you meet him. But he's never, there's no contrition. He's never sorry. He's scared. Everything is driven by his own sense of survival. But the minute he gets past, okay, well, you're not going to kill me right now, he goes back to being vicious and mean and ugly. He talks back to Top Dollar. He talks back to Eric Draven's The Crow character that's, you know, possibly going to kill him too. He looks in the face of death and he's that big an asshole that he's like, yeah, well, screw you. Absolutely brilliant. He has a cross between, I don't know, Danny DeVito and the entire cast of Goodfellas. I don't know where he pulled this performance from, but I cannot, and I'll say it again, I cannot imagine anybody replacing him in this movie.
No, I definitely agree. Danny DeVito definitely couldn't, kind of thing.
No.
John Beluto kind of comes off as more of a kind of sniveling, kind of like greed. Like he comes across as such a slimy character.
Yeah, he's a scumbag. He's a dirtball.
Yeah, he reminds me. So just he reminds me of essentially. So he's two things to me. He's in action. He's like greed as greed goes. It doesn't look at the good or bad kind of thing. He's very much that. He's also complacency.
Mm-hmm.
He sees the world and like it doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He just like, you know, he looks the other way. He looks very much the other way in the first scene that you have him in, which is like him being sold some maybe stolen kind of work, and have that character essentially play that kind of like he's such a linchpin in the whole kind of criminal organization. He's someone who skirts the line so badly that, you know, he feels like he's no way in danger.
He's self-centered survival capitalism. And honestly, that makes him one of the most real and grounding characters in the whole movie, which is a sad indictment of society, Paul. A very sad indictment of society. But he is believable. He is believable as that kind of, I'm so in it for myself and I have such a sense of self-importance and all I really want to do is profit, that when he is pushed, he pushes back with attitude and snark and snarl. And again, it's what Polito brought. Because you don't get Joe Pesci to play this role. That's not what you do. You get somebody exactly like Polito to play it, who can bring all that we've just described, and because it's such a real thing, make it seem like a real person. He's the real asshole that we all have either met or know is out there.
Yeah, he's the day-to-day asshole.
He's the others are, you know, criminals writ large. He represents more of society than any of the rest of the characters in a fantastical way, because they're all, we hope, fantastical. This is the mirror to society part of all this. You don't have to bring anybody back from the dead if they're already profiting from just general pain and suffering of others and not caring. Anybody beat me in the chat with a good casting?
No, we got Adrian saying that that was a hell of a cast.
Thank you, Adrian.
Brian said superb.
Thank you, Adrian. Good to have you here.
Superb casting all round, and Pilato is a great. I can't.
He's great at that type of role. Yeah, I've got it down the bottom here. He is great at that type of role, and that's why he's worked so much. He's, you know, the Coen brothers love him. They put him in a bunch of films. And if you want an endorsement, the Coen brothers love him. I'll just leave it there. Paul, I think we should go to our to our final thoughts on all this. For me, I told Paul this a bunch of years ago. I never want to do an episode about The Crow because I really do. It is one of those films that means way too much to me. I think I've rambled in this episode because of that. But it's the fact that there's a remake and a reboot coming out now that I think will probably not be massively well received. I hope it's a great movie. Don't get me wrong. I hope it's a wonderful movie, and I hope somebody says you have to see it. I'm not getting that vibe. But for me, this is one of those few times where I'm saying I'm going to avoid it. And it's because for me, 1994, I got to see a perfect movie with absolutely perfect casting.
Yeah, agreed. I think that we hope that the creatives and actors in the movie do really well. We think that they've probably done a great job and stuff like that. It all coming together may not be as perfect as The Crow from 1994, kind of thing. So I definitely understand where there's some movies that are untouchable to me, and if they ever get touched, I'm just like, I'm sorry. I know I'm an avid fan, but I cannot bring myself to go to that.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And it's just the way it is.
There's very few things I break my own rules for. And this is one of those things. I'm always like, see anything and then judge it. Not this time. So what I would suggest to everybody is, as we sign off, listen to some wise words from Brandon Lee himself. Paul, I'm going to play us out on someone else. So let's just remind everybody, if you've enjoyed this, hit a like. If you can find your way to it, please feel free to subscribe. But definitely comment. Let us know if any of these castings could have been beat at the time. That'd be awesome. So with that, I've been Patrick.
And I've been Paul.
We've been Hear Us Out, and here's some words of wisdom, everybody.
Because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. And yet everything happens only a certain number of times.